The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, well, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. Welcome to the show. 2 issues to discuss. Second half of the show, North Korea, what do they really have up their sleeve? Why do they keep defying the international community in general, the United States in particular, with their underground nuclear explosion and test firing of missiles? Can they be trusted? But for the first half hour, we want to talk about an historic appointment to the United States Supreme Court by President Obama, Sonia Sotomayor, who is a federal district court judge here in New York, and who would be, if confirmed by the U.S. Senate, the first Hispanic member of the High Court, only the 3rd woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court. She's a rags to riches story, the child of Puerto Rican immigrants and a person who grew up in a public housing project in the Bronx, just a home run shot away from Yankee Stadium. And now, as she said today in a very moving presentation when she was introduced to the nation by the president today, a very humbling but a very historic experience, the appointment of Sonia Sotomayor as the next Supreme Court Justice. Joining us today to talk about Judge Sotomayor is Thomas Dupree. He is a partner with the Gibson, Dunn Crutchers Appellate and Constitutional Law Practice Group in Washington, D.C. He has argued many cases in front of Judge Sotomayor and can talk to us from firsthand knowledge about her demeanor on the bench and maybe about how she is personally. Tom Dupree, welcome back to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Gary, I'm happy to be here.
Good having you as always. So she said today, the judge, I am an ordinary person blessed with extraordinary opportunities. Pretty humble for somebody who's just been nominated to the Supreme Court.
That's right. Certainly, Judge Sotomayor brings with her, among many other things, a compelling personal story. As you noted, she grew up in very modest circumstances and yet has obviously gone on to great heights in the legal profession and as a judge.
So from a political standpoint, I guess already the conservatives, in fact, they started attack ads about this appointment even before it was announced, are not going to be particularly happy about Sotomayor because she tends to be a fairly progressive jurist, I guess. However, she was appointed to the federal bench by the first President Bush.
That's right. Judge Sotomayor originally became a judge when the first President Bush appointed her to the district court. And then a few years after that, in 1998, President Clinton put her onto the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, which is based in New York, and that's where she currently sits today.
So you've practiced before her on the appellate level or on the district court level?
At the appellate level. I've personally argued cases in front of her and handled or managed literally dozens, if not hundreds more. So I'm pretty familiar with her personally and as well with her style on the bench of asking questions.
She made some kind of a comment which she acknowledged at the time that she did, that it would probably come back to haunt her at some point, about how federal judges legislate from the bench as opposed to interpret. And that, if taken totally out of context, doesn't look so good, and it's a lot of fuel for the Republican fodder against her, I guess. But what are your experiences litigating before her?
Well, there's no question that she has a direct style from the bench. She asks a lot of questions. She asks a lot of good, hard, tough questions. And as a lawyer, a lot of times you'd like to go into court and be able to speak in an uninterrupted fashion for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. But you can't usually do that with Judge Sotomayor, because she will quickly zero in on the weaknesses in your argument, the weak parts of your case, as a good judge should, frankly, and ask you the tough questions and really force you to defend your position and perhaps talk about aspects of your case that you'd rather not talk about because they're not your strong grounds.
Yeah, I hear that, and I've never had the pleasure of sitting in her court, but I hear that when you are an attorney and you come before this judge, you better be well prepared. And I guess that's exactly what you want for somebody sitting on the Supreme Court, somebody who can stand up there or sit up there and ask the tough questions of the lawyers representing both sides of cases that are always landmark decisions.
I think that's exactly right. Certainly the advice that I'd always give my lawyers when I was a lawyer at the Justice Department, my folks would go in and argue before her, is I would always say you got to make sure you're very prepared when you're arguing before Judge Sotomayor, because if you do not have a firm command of the precedent, if you don't fully understand the cases that you're relying on, and you don't have a command of the evidentiary record, that she'll find you out. She will ask you those tough questions, and so you really got to make sure that you know your case and your argument cold from beginning to end.
So she obviously knows the law very well, and so that's a plus, I would say, in anybody's book. But what about the concerns that some conservatives have already raised about her political leanings and how that might influence the decisions she renders or the vote she takes on the bench?
Well, certainly it will be no surprise. I mean, I think if you look at her record and how she's addressed the constitutional issues and other hot-button issues in the past, it's probably not a great stretch to say that she does not approach the law or the Constitution as do, say, Justice Scalia or Justice Thomas. At the same time, I don't think anyone expected President Obama to nominate someone who did take the perspective of Justice Scalia or Thomas. So I don't think it's surprising in that respect. And certainly, as Senator McCain would often say, elections have consequences. And it's certainly President Obama's right and prerogative to appoint the person who he thinks is the best candidate for the Supreme Court.
Are there any particular issues that might be in the pipeline to the Supreme Court where she, in your opinion, might cast the deciding vote on?
Well, it's really hard to say at this point, just because you never know what issues are going to get up to the Supreme Court, and you also don't know the facts of any given case in which a legal issue